What's up, Packers fans? Aaron Nagler here with a very special guest. We're here to get to the real stuff, the good stuff, with the czar of the playbook himself. It's Emory Hunt. Emory, how are you, man?
I'm doing fine, man. It's a pleasure as always to get on and talk shop with you and Packer Nation out there.
I tell you what, we just did about 5 minutes before we came on, and I'm pumped, man. I'm fired up. I always love talking ball with you. It's so great. Obviously, something we did talk about was the fact that this time of year, we're still over 3 weeks away until the draft, but we keep hearing the same 20, 25 names no matter where you go, because that's what drives the coverage, the top tier guys. As I always do when I talk with you, Emory, I know you are the master of diving deep on these prospects and looking at, players that probably aren't making headlines right now, but who could be good role players and or surprises down the road for whichever team ends up selecting them. In this case, specifically the Packers. I don't think there's any question where the Packers' needs are. Everybody kind of knows what they are, whether that's corner, whether it's defensive tackle. Probably need a wide receiver in this draft class. Let's start with cornerback, because they obviously brought back Kevin King, but you have to think they got to look long term. He is not the long term answer. His contract sets up that they can move on after this year, which I suspect they will. If not, maybe even in the draft itself, after the draft, if they get a couple guys they really like. Who might someone be that isn't on Packers fans' radars right now? Because we keep hearing Asante Samuel Jr., Greg Newsome, and those are good guys, and I think there's a possibility they may end up being, Packers, one or two of them. But who might be, a prospect or two down the road later in the draft that Packers fans could see ending up wearing a G?
You know what's interesting about the Packers team, and probably more so than any team that I watched, they legitimately have types. You could see their types.
Very true.
At wide receiver, they love those long, slim dudes.
Yep.
And at with difficult names to pronounce. And in the secondary, they like these lengthy, slender guys that got ball skills. So with that being a backdrop, I like Cameron Bynum out of Cal. I know he went down to the Senior Bowl and he was a bigger name because, again, you're talking about someone that actually went to the Senior Bowl.
They love Senior Bowl guys too. You talk about types. If you ball out the Senior Bowl, the Packers love you. No
so
question.
you got him. He could press. He has A+ press skills, A+ ability to mirror and match, and he has ball skills and ball instincts. Ball skills in the fact that he could take the ball away. Instincts in the fact that he could play the ball while it's in the air. He's not surprised by contact. He won't jump 7 seconds before the ball gets there, like we saw in the playoffs.
Oh, bad memories, man.
That was a bad play, man. I felt for him because he maybe the sun was in his eye, and that's what caused him to jump from that angle. But he jumped hella early.
Where
it was tough, but Bynum to me is a really good corner. I have a pretty high grade on him. So wherever he goes, if he goes to Green Bay, I think that's one guy. Zach McPherson of Texas Tech. When you watch Big 12 defenses, you are being of our age, we tend to have we crossed over to the point where we're cynical about everything.
Oh,
so when it's time
100%.
to watch Big 12, you're like, all right, which defender gonna make a tackle 7 yards down the field? Which DB gonna give up 16 yards of cushion? But McPherson, I was like, man, this dude, he's got legit skills. He's never in a bad spot. He plays at Texas Tech. He has great ball skills, good athleticism, sees the game very well. And I think he's someone, although he's not the long, slender guy, he's about 5'10-ish, 5'11 maybe. But he has good ball skills, good instincts. I'm a big fan of his game, and I thought he played well consistently. So this is 2 years in a row where I've been a fan of defensive players from Texas Tech. Broderick, I forget his last name, but he was a defensive Thompson. He was a defensive lineman for Texas Tech last year. He's with the Ravens. I also liked Jordan Brooks. Obviously, he was my number one inside linebacker in last year's draft from Texas Tech. And McPherson this year playing really good defense for the Red Raiders. So those are two corners. And St. Juice of Minnesota, he fits that Packers mold. He's about 6'2 and a half, 200 pounds. Athletic freak, long guy, and was again a Senior Bowl guy, but he can mirror and match. And if you want a small school player, Brian Mills from North Carolina Central, I was on the broadcast for their game against Morgan State. We had 2 fantastic interceptions inside the red zone that took away scoring drives, and they ended up winning that ball game. He was down to the Senior Bowl as well. So I know I named Senior Bowl guys, but these are some of the guys that
You should, though, because
people are not talking.
those are guys that aren't being talked about. That's what I'm always trying to find. People that you turn on NFL Network and you hear the same 5 names over and over and over again. You want to jump off a bridge. Let's look at defensive tackle. I mean, the theme all offseason, from me anyway, is can we get Kenny Clark some help? Can we get Kenny Clark some help? I mean, they brought back Tyler Lancaster. If that's not treading water, I don't know what is. They have got to get somebody, anybody who's got some upside, who's got some athleticism, just playing, more than a few downs next to Mr. Clark. What do you got for me, Emory? Tell me there's some help out there available.
Big time. I found this class of defensive tackles to be impressive. And, normally you're looking at guys that were probably going to top 15. You have maybe like 2 or 3 guys every year, but this year is not that. But you do have guys that can play. Onwuzurike, Levi Onwuzurike from Washington is a good one. He didn't play this year. He opted out, but he was tremendous. He's consistent as far as how well he can win up front. Davion Nixon out of Iowa is my number 1 D tackle, but
they love Iowa players in Green Bay, no doubt.
Oh, then they gonna love him because he was excellent. He's someone that can whip a guard all day long. He's more of your classic 3 tech, so I don't know if he would fit in what they want. But then you look at a guy like Milton Williams out of Louisiana Tech, who played defensive end when he got to Louisiana Tech, and now played inside. So he's got that athleticism of an end, but the ability to play up front inside as a tackle or 5 tech, so to speak. So a 3-4 in. So ever they want to go, he gives them that flexibility. He has great pass rushing moves. He has a length to really extend and push a gap back into the quarterback. I think he's ideally suited to play in Green Bay, considering what they want in those defensive linemen, if they don't plan to go to a traditional.
Well, that's what's so interesting too, is like with the defensive coordinator switch and the scheme somewhat. So I mean, there's still a 3-4 base, etc. But it is going to be interesting what they ask of and or focus on for their defensive linemen. We heard some damning quotes from Blake Martinez a couple years ago regarding what was asked, and he was told just to clean up, whatever the Smiths did, and then Kenny Clark was just balling out with no help. It's about time we got to get Kenny some help. Looking at wide receiver, with the Packers, obviously were thought to be, dead set on taking one last year. You were live with us during the Cheesehead TV draft stream last year when Packers fans lost their mind when they not only didn't take a wide receiver early, they took a quarterback instead. This year, I think there's a real good chance they do take a wide out at some point in this draft, probably later. They haven't traditionally liked to take them early. Give me a name or two who might fit the bill in Green Bay later on in the draft.
Well, let's start with Green Bay Packer types, right? And Austin Watkins of UAB. He's long, he's explosive. This dude can get down the field in an instant. I watched the one game that stood out to me was when he played Southern Miss, and he just lit those guys up from start to finish, and this is someone that gets down the field so fast, it puts a defense in a bind. He's about 6'1", 6'2", about 190 pounds, but he is explosive in his route running. He's able to go up and sky at the highest point, make plays. So he fits their mode. He even could be your starting gunner on special teams. That's how explosive and fast he is. Isaiah McCoy out of Kent State, another one that's violently aggressive when the ball is in the air. It's like the ball did him something personally. He wants him, meet the ball at his highest point. Right. And he's also another explosive athlete that's 6'3", 200 pounds, 6'2", 200 pounds. So those two guys, mid-major guys that are able to play above the rim, have the athletic explosiveness to where they can be deep threats and also catch and run guys on those slants and or skinny posts and catch it and take off. If you want a small school name, I've said this guy before, but Mike Strachan of University of Charleston, 6'5", 225, ran about a 4.4-ish, high 4.4 at his pro day, but they didn't play this year. They're playing in the spring, but he clearly opted for the draft and was someone that the league knew about last year. And he dominated his level of competition, Division II. But that program has developed some pro players the last 3 years. You talk about Charleston, John John Kaminsky for the Atlanta Falcons. You look at there's a guy this year, Kenny Rochelle, who's a defensive lineman that's supposed to be in a camp. And the Bucks had one that his name slips my mind, but they have had 3 guys come from that program that are going to be NFL players. So he's played well. He's been developed. He's a big, tall guy. Can play inside as a bigger inside receiver, but has the speed to get deep. And that name is going to drive me the rest of the damn show.
It's just, you'll hit it. You'll call me tonight at like
right.
12 and be like, I got it. Let's pull back just real quick here. The Packers obviously have their needs, and quarterback, we would think, is not one of them. But you never know. Wiley Brian Gutekunst could surprise us again. Maybe he takes a guy on day 3. Wouldn't put that past him, actually. But what is going on with the state of the quarterback position in the NFL? And you look at the draft and the trades that have been made. I mean, there was one made right before we came on here with the Panthers trading for Sam Darnold. We have the 49ers jumping up to 3, presumably to get a quarterback. You've had more quarterback movement this offseason than I can remember as far as guys changing addresses, etc. Is it just a natural kind of cyclical thing where there's been a shakeup at the position because the older guys are moving on, like Breeze, etc.? We saw Manning retire a couple years ago, and they're just searching for guys who can do it at a high level for consistently for a long time. Or is it just like, are we kind of like at this point where offenses have changed so much, what the defenses are allowed to do is change so much that no one really knows what they want at the quarterback spot? Because with so much changing as far as high octane offenses, being able to do so much pre-snap in a way that really confuses defenses, etc. Quarterbacks with legs, and mobility are obviously in demand. Do you think it's just a question of teams not really knowing they have a firm grasp on what they want, or is it just that kind of rare to find a guy who can do it at a high level on a consistent basis for a long time, and this is kind of the product of that?
I think it's a combination of everything, because we live in a society now where we don't give things time to marinate and grow. So we didn't even know. You think about back when we were growing up watching, NFL football, how many coaching turnovers that we saw then. Barely any coaching turnovers. We see at least 5 coaches change regimes every year now.
That's like the minimum at this point, right?
Exactly, right?
At least
and
the
so
average.
Then you factor in quarterbacks. It's almost like everybody has succumbed to this microwave society and the new flavor of the month, and you don't give something time to really grow, blossom, and to know what you have. Case in point, with someone like Sam Darnold, right? Now, I'm not saying he's better than X, Y, or Z, but I put this tweet out before we jumped on air, like, man, we haven't seen him play a full season yet. So every time he's built momentum in the right direction, he gets hurt, or he's out with mono, or he loses
something
happens where he misses time and has to come back and hit reset. And that's not an excuse. That's just a reason. And you look at someone like Dwayne Haskins, who was getting in 2 games, taken out, then they put him in, but didn't really believe in him, and the offense changed, and so now he's on another team. So you don't really give. And he had 3 coaches. So now you don't really give these guys a chance to really grow. The coaching staff, they have to come in and win. And with the GM has to come in and win. Twitter says you got to draft this guy. The fans now say you got to draft this guy. The owner who pays you and signs your check you have to draft this guy because.
And by the way, the owner is on Twitter.
They're right. The owner's on Twitter going back and forth with fans. And so now the owner is saying, well, the fans won't come if we don't get this guy. So now you get the GM who wants his job because you make great salary. Coaching, who is one of 32 jobs in the world that everybody wants. So he's going to do what the GM says. Everybody's going to smile, take that picture as the player that they didn't want, hold that draft, hold their jersey up. And now we got to roll with it. And then 2 years later, this is not the guy I want. So like, look at Matt. I heard something before we got on about Matt Nagy.
I was just going to mention the Bears. I was just going to mention the perfect example.
He ruined Mitch Trubisky. I'm like, wait a minute. Didn't they bring him in, and didn't he get to the playoffs with Mitch Trubisky?
His first year. They won the division.
Like, how about Mitch Trubisky may have been a first-round talent? So you reached that zenith. Don't blame that on Nagy. He got to where he needed to do. He got to where they could possibly go. The first they can go with Mitch Trubisky. And so that's not on him. That just shows you that guy probably shouldn't have been a first-round talent. But at least they gave Nagy the time to figure it out. They gave Trubisky the time to figure it out. Gave him a second chance, throwing him back in the lineup. Right. And so, and if you give someone time, we get to see things kind of grow and develop. Like I said this back then, before I even became an analyst, so to speak. We were in college at the time. It was like, man, Drew Brees wasn't the problem in San Diego. Why would they go ahead and draft Phillip Rivers when Brees wasn't terrible? And we see how that played out for Brees in New Orleans. So I think I think we've become so immune to patience. From a musical standpoint,
yeah, no doubt.
You love how we love old school music because it took time to make good stuff. Now everybody just puts out stuff. You don't even give it a chance to really resonate. Movies the same way. So I think we have to get back to where we have that level of patience and allow someone the comfort to grow into a role. Right, wrong, or indifferent. We wouldn't know what Sam Bradford is or a Steve McNair was, or if they didn't have that time to grow. And I think nowadays, because of how society is set up, that's why we see what we see out there every year in the NFL.
I couldn't agree with everything you just said more. That is spot on, as it usually is. Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Emory, thank you so much for joining me today, man. We'll talk to you again before the draft and hopefully during the draft. It'll be great to have you on.
Appreciate you guys for having me on.